Ladies and gentlemen, fellas, what's up? What's poppin'? How you doing? You're gonna notice that there's a different layout on this video right now because we're traveling, we're on the road, we don't have no green screen, we don't have no studio, but I like this layout. We reached out to the graphic designer, Brendan, the god, the man himself, and he slammed this bad boy together off of something that I saw online. I think you're going to enjoy it. We're gonna have full screen abilities to be checking out a couple of things on this big screen if you're watching on the YouTube version, to the left of me right now and to your right. So welcome in. It's gonna be the same stuff as always, right? The injury news for this 5 or 7 game Friday slate. Injury news, we're going to smack you with it. A lot of injury news carrying over from yesterday. Again, smack you with it right now on this Friday. Lovely start to your weekend. Hopefully you're having a beautiful day out there already, depending on when you're watching this. And then we'll hit you with the top 12 plays of the day as of right now. Those plays will be updated as always over on Patreon, link down below. The optimizer will be put into full use with those updated projections throughout the day as we get more injury news. I'm not expecting as much news as yesterday because there was 4 more games and 8 more teams playing yesterday and a whole bunch of wacky news and even more guys getting hurt throughout the game yesterday. We can hit on that in a second. So, as we're here with a brand new format, welcome if you're brand new here. This is a new viewing experience for everybody, including yourself now. So hey, hit the like, hit the subscribe, do those things. I appreciate it. You can check out some of the free downloadable PDFs for NBA strategy that we have down below. You can check out some of the tools, projections, even an optimizer now all bundled together that we have down below for all of you. Let's start it off right away. Let's not waste no time on your beautiful Fridays right now. And let's start it off with the injury report in the Rockets. The Rockets right now, PJ Tucker, they're cutting ties with him, so he's gone. Get out of here. We don't even have any centers to begin with. He's been playing small ball center. Justin Patton show, some other guys who are finally coming up from the G League. Eric Gordon gets hurt yesterday. John Wall was out yesterday with a knee injury, not rest, all right? It was coming back from an all-star game with a week off, so it's a knee injury for John Wall. Something you have to keep in mind right now. Jalen Brown, sure, got more run. These other guys like Nwaba and Jason Tate, they get more run. Kevin Porter Jr. from the Cavs, who left the Cavs not because of his skills, but because of his off-the-court issues in the locker room, finally got brought up in that last game. Played 29 minutes. We'll talk about him more in a second, but if there's no John Wall today, Eric Gordon getting hurt late yesterday, now having to play like 17, 18 hours later, I expect him to be more doubtful than questionable today compared to John Wall. But if those guys both miss, it's the Kevin Porter Jr. show, and we can talk about him in a second. For the Cavs today, they're getting back Larry Nance. You're getting a questionable today Darius Garland and a questionable Kevin Love. Larry Nance looks good if there's no Kevin Love and no minutes limit on him. If Kevin Love is in with no minutes limit, he's the one that I would go to. 76ers, Embiid and Simmons missed yesterday because of COVID contact tracing with a barber at the All-Star game. They're eligible to return today after a week of contact tracing and isolation, so I'm expecting them to play, but I have them as questionable. DeMar DeRozan is out today. LaMarcus Aldridge has cut ties with the Spurs as of a couple days ago, so those guys are not going to be there. Lots of bumps to that entire team now, as, I mean, Aldridge's still a point per minute producer, but obviously DeRozan kind of the captain of that ship in San Antonio with the San Antonio super spreaders, if you will. For the Magic today, just check all the questionable tags, right? If Cole Anthony potentially returns, he should be returning really any day now based on the news that we've gotten. Evan Fournier and Terrence Ross missed yesterday, so just track those news on really their guards and their small forwards. Bradley Beal questionable today. Obviously, if he's out, some of the other guards get some bumps up like Raul Neto, but the biggest one is Russell Westbrook becomes one of the biggest smash plays on the slate. He'll start to produce over 1.6 fantasy points per minute, if not higher, in 37 or so minutes of play. For the Nuggets, it continues to be Paul Millsap. It continues to be JaMychal Green questionable. Gary Harris is out. And then Bam Adebayo is going to miss his second straight game, which just leads the way to guys like Kelly Olynyk, who Precious Achiuwa got no run last game. And Olynyk, once he was not in the starting lineup and they went with KZ Okopala, seemed as if Precious Achiuwa was not somebody who wanted to play in that game. We updated the projections for that. Kelly Olynyk ended up smashing for over 30 minutes. You ended up getting guys like KZ Okopala just seeing minutes, but not really doing a ton with them, or at least something that I think would be sticky with those minutes. So that's your injury news. We're going to break down into Schmack It right now. Hit around the top 12 plays. And we're going to start off with somebody who I don't think has really ever been on this list unless it's been like a 2-game slate. And that's going to be Mr. Steven Adams. So Steven Adams right now, $5,300, a 1.75x multiplier over on SuperDraft. Look, the last game that they ended up playing yesterday, New Orleans ended up getting in a massive blowout. So you saw some guys on this team kind of get into a trap, right? The NWA trap, I say. And that's Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He played a decent amount of minutes, 25 minutes or so. Didn't do too much with them, but he ended up playing the entire fourth quarter because of a massive blowout in that last game. But if you want to go over, and this is the nice thing that we can do kind of with this on the road stuff here, if you wanted to go over to the New Orleans Pelicans and just see what Steven Adams is doing this year, it's not great, but if you can get a 28-minute game out of him, a lot of the times he'll start to pay off what is becoming a cheap price point. So we're not buying into Steven Adams because of just a good player or anything on this team right now. Zion taking a lot away from him, especially increasingly in the rebounding rate, with Zion now over this last month or so picking up about a 20% rebounding rate, but Adams is still right now around a 0.95 fantasy point per minute producer. I can zoom in right here and you can see Adams so far on the season. This is on Add More Funds. You get him with a 0.9 fantasy point per minute. If you want to get onto Add More Funds with a discount, you can probably just comment down below. It's free to use, but if you want like these customizable dashboards, it's a pretty cool tool. I usually use it during every single live stream. I have it up on the other stream when I'm doing these live streams or videos, but obviously only working off of one screen today. So the biggest thing with Steven Adams is basically it's a cheap price point for somebody who will get you consistent production if he gets the minutes, right? And he's been getting the minutes as of late, averaging about 28 per game on the year. I'll project him for 28 today. And the other thing that makes him appealing in terms of stabilizing those minutes, the reason why centers get more consistent production is they play closer to the basket. Just 2-foot opportunities give them closer to like a 60% effective field goal rate. But the reason why I think that those minutes can be more stable today, he's going up against Cleveland. Cleveland just got Larry Nance back. They might have Kevin Love back. They already have Jared Allen out there, who's going to be playing probably 30-plus minutes and 32, 34-plus minutes. Cleveland is now a bigger team. JaVale McGee's out there as well to back it up. So you're just going to be getting more of an opportunity for Steven Adams to close the game out if it stays close against a team that will be closing with their center. Some teams just close small. They take the center off the court. They go for shooters, right? They go for a quicker pace of play format. I think that Cleveland will be closing with their big men, and most notably Jared Allen, which keeps Steven Adams on the court as our number 12 play today. Heading to the number 11 play now, and this is more so he's on here because I just wanted to be able to touch on what he did yesterday. And this is Kevin Porter Jr. Again, $3,200, 1.75x multiplier, played 29 minutes yesterday. There was reasons why he played more minutes yesterday than normal. It's because John Wall was out. It's because late in the game Eric Gordon goes out. But he played 15 minutes in the first half, and we can show you this on Popcorn Machine right now, just so you can kind of see what was happening here. The game did blow out yesterday, but I'll zoom in on this, and this is Houston's team. So you can see Kevin Porter did not start this game, but he checks in and he plays about 6 minutes in the first quarter, and then he ends up playing in the second quarter the first 3 minutes. So he's got 9 minutes there, and then he ends up finishing out the last of the second quarter with 5 minutes and 43 seconds of play. There's a couple other seconds that he played in the first quarter that I'm not accounting for. So he basically played 15 minutes in the first half. Again, if John Wall's in, this is probably not something I'm looking at all that much. Eric Gordon being out and John Wall in will give a little bit of a bump here, but Kevin Porter Jr. is a good player. He's a quality player. He left the Cavs because he was getting in arguments and fights in the locker room, off-court issues, and then he went over to the Rockets and they signed him. This is a quality player that is going to be way, in my opinion, levels above the likes of Jason Tate, Sterling Brown, Ben McLemore, and those types of skill sets. So if he starts to see minutes, especially if there's no Gordon or Wall, he's going to be a very good play. He's going to be better than the number 11 play. If you want to see what he actually did in the game, he ended up playing 29.5 minutes. They actually took him out and put other types of scrub players into the game to close out the game for the final 4 or 5 minutes when it was a 20-point blowout. So that's just showing how much they actually value him compared to some other players like an Anthony Lamb and a Kenyon Martin Jr. and a Ben McLemore on this team. But he shot 5 of 11. He shot in that game. He had 10 assists, 5 rebounds, 3 steals, a block. So he was picking up a lot in a lot of areas. He was a good assist player when he was with the Cavs as well. To see that come through. But the reason why he's number 11 on this board right now and he's not higher up is because I have to see the news. I don't want to put him as like the number 1 or 2 play on the day, and then we get John Wall in, and then it's like, okay, well, your list is not that great anymore, right? Already at 2 o'clock today because they ended up already putting in John Wall and maybe even a Gordon. But I just want to let you know that Kevin Porter Jr. at 3,200. The second, if you see John Wall out today again with a knee soreness, or maybe Oladipo takes a rest today because he's somebody who's been a rest candidate all season long. If you see one of those guys out along with Eric Gordon, you're going to be getting close to 30 minutes, maybe even a start out of Kevin Porter Jr., who I'm going to project as over a fantasy point per minute if those guys indeed end up being out. 10 play in the day is somebody who, when the NBA returned on that 2-game slate, we were all in on. He was our number 3 play. A lot of people were on a 2-game slate. A lot of people were because it was just center opportunity cost. There's no other centers on that 2-game slate 2 days ago. Jonas Valanciunas' price point comes up. He is now up to 1.3 fantasy points per minute on the season, and I expect stable minutes here. If you get Jonas Valanciunas playing stable minutes, let's say 30 or 32 plus. He played 32 in that last one. He goes off for 60 plus fantasy points. He has that mega ceiling on him. He's averaging 27 per game on the season. If I project him for 30 or 30 plus in this game, and we can get more stable minutes because he's going up against the likes of Jokic, maybe even JaMychal Green and Paul Millsap, who are questionable return today, so a bigger Denver team. But just in general, going up against Nikola Jokic, you might be saying, Jonas Valanciunas, he has to stay in the paint, he's flat-footed. That is honestly true, but who else do they have in Memphis right now? They're going to put Brandon Clark and take him out against Nikola Jokic, maybe, but I don't think it's going to be that much of a one-on-one game as much as positionless basketball. And Jonas Valanciunas gives them the best ability from a rebounding standpoint against this Denver team, and just in my opinion, an overall scoring standpoint as well. But a 1.3 fantasy point per minute production rate at around 30 minutes a player, so you're going to get Jonas Valanciunas grading out pretty well. On SuperDraft, the 1.45x multiplier is looking very good. Now we're getting inside the top 10, and before we get inside the top 10, I want to let you know about the sponsor of the show. PrizePicks started sponsoring the show this past weekend. PrizePicks is, the reason why I like them is you can just choose fantasy points, so you can just basically take player props and combine a couple of them together. You can go up to 5, you can go up to just 2. They're running promotions right now. So basically what I'm going to do here is just pick 2 of these guys based on my early projections right now. And based on my early projections right now, I'm going to be leaning on taking the over for Jimmy Butler right now. So I'll take the over on Jimmy Butler, and I'll take the over on Ja Morant. So if you take those 2 together, you can parlay them together, and then you just basically 2x your money. So it's kind of player props. You can choose specific stats as well, but I like the fantasy points because I project fantasy points. So if you want to check out my fantasy points projections down below, this can easily help you with this. But the reason why PrizePicks is pretty interesting is because you get a $100 deposit match up to $100, 100% up to $100. So you put in $10, they'll give you 10. You want to put all the way up to 100 and have just like a $200 bankroll, they'll match you 100. Now you have a $200 bankroll that can last you for an entire month. So you just basically got $100 free for a bankroll out of nowhere. And it's fun because if you have any sense of fantasy points or you have projections, mine or somebody else's, it makes it really easy to understand what's happening here, and you can start to go towards things like, you know what, Nikola Jokic's projection is close on him, I'll stay away. Zion Williamson, honestly, I'm tempted to go under on Zion Williamson, right? If I had to lean one way, it'd be over on Morant, it'd be well over right now on Jimmy Butler, or confidently over on him, projecting for close to 50 points. Zion, I'm going to be projecting for closer to 38 points or so. So I actually like Zion as probably my favorite play here, under 44 points, based on the prize pick scoring. I have him projected for closer to 40 points, not 44 points. That's a pretty massive gap there. Dejante Murray looks appealing, but that's a nice projection already on him. Same thing can be said for Zach LaVine. Now with Lauri Markkanen back, Otto Porter Jr. potentially can return today, Nikola Vucevic. So this is where I'm at right now. So you don't have to take all three of these if you want to just take two of them together. I currently like Zion, the under 44 points, Ja Morant over 37. If you want to tag these, you can find the link down below. Again, you get that bonus up to $100. Just use the code SAL and that link in the description. That code SAL, S-A-L, lets you know that you came from me. And then Butler over 46 points. If I had to rank my priorities in these three, I'd probably honestly rank it 1 Zion, 2 Butler, 3 Morant. So thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring this part of the program. We can now get into our number 9 play on the day today. The number 9 play is going to be Dillon Brooks, and Dillon Brooks is going to be somebody that continues to get the same narrative. Now he's $5,200. He's way too cheap. Dillon Brooks, it really does come down to just foul trouble. In that last game, he picked up a foul in the first quarter. He then picked up 2 fouls in the third quarter, and then he picked up a foul in the fourth quarter. But those 2 fouls in the third quarter or second quarter ended up leading to him not playing the final 4.5 minutes of the first half. If he plays those minutes, he ends up playing like 30 minutes in the game in that point, and then things can start to look a little bit better for Dillon Brooks. So Dillon Brooks, a fine fantasy point per minute producer, averaging 0.93 fantasy points per minute on the season, 29 minutes per game when he's not getting in foul trouble, a 26% usage rate. He is a really good player. It just comes down to, can he actually get the foul trouble? So his salary is reducing because of foul trouble, because of some injuries that he left some games early with. So right now, Dillon Brooks, if I project him for 28 minutes today, around a 0.9 fantasy point per minute producer, he's going to grade out as my number early on in the day, 9 play in the slate. So it comes down to foul trouble. You can check Popcorn Machine to kind of see what was happening on that 2-game slate, and we can look at it pretty quickly here, and you can see how I'm kind of seeing these things, how I build out my projections and minutes projections for rotations. Here's Dillon Brooks right here, right? You see Dillon Brooks, and if you want to go over to him, he ended up playing the first 7 minutes of the game. He picked up a personal foul right here. Then in the second quarter, he checks in and only plays 3.5 minutes because he picks up 2 fouls, right? He picks up 2 fouls basically a minute apart, and then he checks out and he doesn't play the final 4 minutes and 4 seconds. Right here, you can see with the stint that he played. So in that game, he ended up playing a total of 24.2 minutes. So if he would have played that, he would play like 29.5 minutes in this game. That's pretty important, especially for his price point. If you're playing 4 minutes and you get an extra 4 fantasy points during that time, I mean, 4 fantasy points is the difference between winning a tournament and finishing honestly like 100th, right? When you're getting down to that, or the difference between not cashing and cashing. So that's pretty important. So that's important. That's the way that I kind of look at the rotations each day to project my minutes. You can find all my projections rankings linked down below. Let's get into the top 8 now. Number 8 is going to be Kelly Olynyk, who did draw the start at center in that last game. Now he gets Chicago and Wendell Carter Jr., which I'm not worried about. Even Lauri Markkanen, not worried about it. Those guys can actually move out of the paint more times than they'll be a threat in the paint. So at 5,700, no Bam Adebayo. Saw 35 minutes in that last game. He's going to average around a fantasy point per minute. If you want to go over to Miami here on Add More Funds, we can take off Bam Adebayo. It'll say that he's going to average like 0.9 fantasy points per minute. That's not also taking into account Kelly Olynyk playing just at the 5 like he did last game mainly. It's taking into account him playing at the 4 as well. So Kelly Olynyk is averaging a 18% usage rate and a 17% defensive rebounding rate. You can see Olynyk's numbers right here. The second player right here playing the second most minutes with no Bam Adebayo. Just make sure that he's still starting at the 5. If he starts at the 4, it's fine, but it's not as much of an interest with the price point coming up. And he's averaging 0.9 fantasy points per minute. Again, that's with a lot of those minutes of him playing at the 4 with Achua, as you can see above him playing the most minutes with no Bam, with Achua right now playing at center and Kelly Olynyk at the 4 in a lot of these minutes. The second Kelly Olynyk starts at the 5 and plays more at the 5 potentially today like he did last game, that's when you start to see Olynyk start to average a higher rebounding rate, start to make more of his shots and go from like a 54% effective field goal rate shooter right here to like 60+%, and he starts to average like 1.1 fantasy points per minute and starts to spike. So Kelly Olynyk right now is going to be our number 8 play on the day with no Bam Adebayo. Number 7 is just going to start targeting these Spurs, and let's move back to Add More Funds here, and you can see what I'm talking about with the Spurs. So San Antonio today is not going to be having their number 1 player, or let's just say 1A, 1B with Dejante Murray and DeMar DeRozan. They're not going to be having Aldridge, who in the past has been a top three player for them. This year has not been that great, but if you take those guys off the court, you start to not have a massive minute sample, but it's at least 300 minutes right now, and look what Rudy Gay does. Rudy Gay starts to average over a fantasy point per minute, which is kind of where he's at on the year, but the biggest thing that starts to happen is you get stabilization in his minutes. He starts to play, I'm going to project him comfortably for 26, maybe even 28 minutes today. If I can project him for 28 minutes at a fantasy point per minute, probably a little bit more than that because the defensive rebounding rate's probably going to come up. He's averaging right now an 18.8% defensive rebounding rate with no DeMar DeRozan, no Aldridge on the court. I'll probably start to project that today at like a 20-21% defensive rebounding rate, especially in a matchup against Orlando where, yeah, there's Vooch, but he's not going up against Vooch. Kind of like the power forward options that he'll be boxing out, if you will, in this game are not going to be all that worryful, right? You're going to have like Kem Birch and some other guys like Chuma on this team, so I'm not too worried about that. So $5,200, a 1.8x multiplier in Superdraft. It's okay, not as appealing, but yes, Rudy Gay at $5,200. You give him 27, you give him 28 minutes over fantasy point per minute. He's just going to be having maybe not increased production, but now increased time to show his production. So he's our number 7 play. We go over now to the top half of this in the top 6 plays right now. Derek White. So you're going to see some Spurs on here now. Derek White is somebody who we don't have a big minute sample on because he didn't play a lot this season. So right now we only have a minute sample on Derek White of 72 minutes without DeMar DeMar DeRozan and Aldridge on the court, and he's averaging 1.23 fantasy points per minute. I mean, that's like a sample of like 2.5 games. So we really can't rely on that at this point. So he gets a 27% usage rate, 27% assist percentage. Let's just take off DeMar DeRozan so we can put some more minutes in there. So this is going to show you Aldridge on the court, or at least in the games as well. But we just want a bigger sample on Derek White. And the sample increases by a whole 3 minutes. So this is the problem, right? You only had Derek White playing really like these last couple of weeks, but I can feel confident in projecting Derek White for around 1.1 fantasy points per minute. And the bigger thing is we can start to project him for around like 28, 30 minutes of play now, and comfortable about that. If we just show everybody on the court, Derek White so far this season has not played many minutes, just 215, but he's averaging 0.94 fantasy points per minute. And we can see that right here. Highlight Derek White. You can see 0.94 fantasy points per minute, a 22% usage rate, a 20% assist percentage. With no DeMar DeRozan, a guy who averages 1.15 fantasy points per minute, with no Aldridge, a guy who averages 0.95, you can expect this number to start to increase because his usage is going to go up. His assist percentage is going to go up. Heck, even his 6% rebounding rate might go to 10%, which is virtually close to doubling that. Derek White today is going to be a strong play because not only will the minutes stabilize and potentially go up, that production is going to skyrocket, and he's below $5,000, a very strong value play. I'll also say that Lonnie Walker, Patty Mills, these guys are not top 12 plays for me right now, but they're clearly, all these Spurs are clearly going to be looking enticing depending on what the starting lineup looks like, and also depending on what your specific lineup builds are looking like. As we get to the top 5, when there's a lot of value on the slate like that, play around with randomness, right? In the optimizer, we have randomness in there, we have uniques, so play around with those types of things. We have a little bit of a tutorial for you on the optimizer on Patreon so you can get involved in it. You want to be building optimal lineups. I personally hand build my single entry in 3 max. I use 150 max and 20 max with the optimizer, but even my single entry in 3 max, I'll hand build it and I'll compare it to some of the highest projected lineups in the optimizer. It's just a nice visual point to look at, as well as just obviously a convenience to you when you're trying to build 20 and 150 lineups. It tracks your exposures, all that stuff. The big energy optimizer can be found down below on Patreon, along with the projections, the ranks, the super draft player pools, the DraftKings player pools, a bunch of stuff that we update every single day, we being me. Check it out down below on Patreon, patreon.com/Sal_Vetri_. Now to the top 5, and some studs are going to finally come up. You might be saying, wow, there's a lot of value on this slate. There really is. There's a ton of value, and there's only going to be more for this 7-game slate. Russell Westbrook at 10,200. There's really not much to break down here. He's going to play in this game. I'm going to project him for 37 minutes. I'm going to project him for 33, 34% usage. If there's no Bradley Beal, I'm going to start to project him for 40+% usage. I'm going to project him. He's already averaging, even with Beal on the court, like a 40+% usage rate. So with Beal off the court, it gets even better. And we could just look at it just because it's going to be interesting to look at today. If you want to take Bradley Beal off the court today for Washington, it's going to make Russell Westbrook, who averages 1.4 fantasy points per minute with Bradley Beal active, it's going to make him just skyrocket. So he starts to average 1.51 fantasy points per minute, a 38% usage rate. Look at this, a 53.6% assist percentage. He's over 20% defensive rebounding rate. He'll probably more times than not honestly land on a triple-double as long as the game stays close and he gets the minutes. Russell Westbrook will honestly move from like a top 5 play. This is me already kind of projecting half in, half out Bradley Beal. If Bradley Beal goes out, he'll start to move into like a top 2 play, if not the number 1 play in the slate. This 53% assist percentage is absolutely nuts. It's kind of like James Harden last year with the Rockets. Whenever guys like Russell Westbrook are out, this is now what Westbrook is doing when Beal is out. Either way, he produces in a major way. You're going to get big minutes out of him. You're going to get a game against Philadelphia today, which it might be a little bit more difficult for the game to stay close from a minutes perspective. But if it does, if Bradley Beal's in, I still like Westbrook. He's just not a top 5 play. He might be like my number 10, 11, 12 play. If Beal is out, he's only going to move up. Number 4 play in the day is just going to be rinse and repeat Nikola Jokic. I'm really not going to break this one down all that much. Against Memphis today, he has a nice matchup individually. You're going to give him 37 minutes of play today. You're going to give him 1.6 fantasy points per minute. And at 10,900, he still remains $1,000 too cheap. He'll project out for me for around 58 to 60 fantasy points, and he just grades out as a top 5 play. If there's no Bradley Beal, I prefer Westbrook to Jokic, but as of right now, as it stands, I will take Jokic over Westbrook. Number 3 play in the day is going to be Mr. LeBron James. And LeBron James, if you give him 36 minutes at 1.55 fantasy points per minute, he's going to be looking appealing. Now, Dennis Schroeder has come back, and if we want to go over to the Lakers and just kind of look at what the updates are with Anthony Davis off the court, you're going to be seeing in some of these games, in the games that are against opponents that they can actually see in the playoffs or maybe even the finals, LeBron shows up. In a game today against Indiana, a team that is definitely going to be in the playoffs, a team that looks very good, I think he'll show up. He's averaging 1.48, so we'll call it 1.5 fantasy points per minute with no AD on the court, a 23% defensive rebounding rate, over a 40% assist percentage. That's massive because you get clearly more points for assists on DraftKings, 1.5, than you do for rebounds, 1.25. Over a 33% usage rate. He's not even shooting that well, 56%, but that's kind of LeBron's thing, right? I mean, 56% is not terrible, right? He's not like a center, but he's driving a lot. He's shooting a little bit more threes than he normally does, shooting 33% from 3. Not terrible. So, I mean, me saying he's not shooting well is a lie because he's shooting 58.7% true shooting percentage, which is very, very good. So LeBron for me just becomes a priority out of these studs, but you can see, I mean, when there's so much value, the goal is to just get 2 of these studs into your lineup. So right now it would be LeBron and Jokic. If Beal gets ruled out, it would probably be LeBron and Westbrook taking priority there for me, but I'm just going to be rinsing through these guys. Even if Embiid returns today at 10,000, I believe like 400 or 700, I think it is, all these guys, just rinse through them. Get to 2 of these studs, throw in all the value that we have today. It's going to be looking nice. Now, top 2 plays, another stud today whose price is going down. He's averaging 1.54 fantasy points per minute with no Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo is now out yet again, and the price point shrinks by $300 against a weak Chicago team in terms of defense against him. Zach LaVine's defense is improving. Kobe White's is really non-existent. This is going to be a fine spot for Jimmy Butler, who looks good everywhere. 46% assist percentage with no Bam Adebayo. Price point comes down $300. Honestly, Jimmy Butler, we just showed you him on Prize Picks. Follow along Prize Picks down below. Use code SAL to take advantage of that offer. Free money bonus up to $100. You can track that bet and take the over on Jimmy Butler. I had him in that last game projecting out for more than most of the industry. I had him for like 51 fantasy points and change. In this game, he's going to be above 50 fantasy points again, and the price point is now reduced. So Jimmy Butler, number 2 play of the day for us, maybe even gets the cover boy treatment again. But our number 1 play today is going to be Mr. Dejante Murray. And we can go back to the Spurs to show you what's happening with the Spurs when no Aldridge and no DeMar DeRozan is on the court. What you end up seeing for Dejante Murray starts to be pretty encouraging. You start to see Dejante Murray average decent minutes per game. So I'm expecting Dejante Murray in this game to play about 34, 35 minutes, which is key in terms of the more minutes you can get. Obviously, the more production that's going to come along with that. 1.15 fantasy points per minute production. I think that's only going to go up as he's able to get a little bit more ball dominance. But a 27% assist percentage, a 23% usage rate, and a 21% defensive rebounding rate. So Dejante Murray today, right here, you can see these stats, right? 1.1 fantasy points per minute. Here's he's not good at shooting threes when they're off the court, right? 29%, but usage rate right here, 23%. The assist percentage, 27%. The thing with Dejante Murray today is he has a triple-double upside. He has massive upside, and yes, I was very close to making Jimmy Butler number 1, but based on point per minute production, that $1,700 savings from Jimmy Butler to Dejante Murray at $7,500, you can get to 2 studs. You can get to a LeBron James and a Butler. You can get to a Russell Westbrook and a LeBron and still get Dejante Murray, who's going to have a massive ceiling today, who's going to project for me closer to 45 plus fantasy points at just $7,500. I'll give him 34, 35 minutes. He's going to be in a quality matchup against Orlando, especially if all these guys are out, and he's going up against Michael Carter-Williams with some of his toughest defense at the point guard and shooting guard position, and then he's going to average around 1.2 fantasy points per minute. So yes, take advantage of Dejante Murray with these guys off the court. He's too cheap right now. If these guys remain off the court, let's say just Aldridge is obviously not with the team, but let's say DeMar DeRozan was to miss like another 5 games, right? We're just saying this. I don't think it's going to happen, but if he was to miss another 5 games, I think you start to see Dejante Murray priced somewhere around $8,400, $8,500. So we're getting clearly a very cheap price point because DeMar DeRozan got ruled out after these salaries came out. So that is my number 1 play in the day, Dejante Murray from the San Antonio Super Spreaders. So thank you for tuning in today. Please do like, subscribe. Hit all those things. Hit the notification bell as well for when we start to go live once I'm back home. This is the nice format. Hopefully you guys enjoy this format. Obviously, we're working on the road right now, but it was the same exact format in terms of the show layout, but you got to see a little bit more of the data that I use, add more funds, popcorn machine for kind of those game flow situations to see, oh, when did a guy get foul trouble? Did he play less minutes because of foul trouble? Oh, why did a guy stay on the court? Oh, it was a blowout, right? Or, oh, he checked in for somebody who got hurt, like a Kevin Porter Jr. So be sure to keep up with the news. We'll be updating projections, rankings, all those things as we go through it. It's a little bit early here, so I'm talking quieter than I usually do because of those reasons. If somebody was to worry where the New York accent go and all the upbeat throwing your hands around, we're trying to talk quiet. We're trying to get the content out while also minding our manners. Thank you for tuning in. Check out the optimizer projections and tools down below, and also check out Prize Picks and tail me on that bet. We're taking right now the under on Zion's points and the over on Jimmy Butler. If you want to get frisky and throw in the over on John Morant's 37 points, you can on Prize Picks down below, so you can be able to tail that fantasy game entry that we were playing there, not necessarily, or not a bet, a fantasy game entry that we were playing over there on Prize Picks. Use that code SAL to take full advantage of the offer. You all rock. See you all in the next one, potentially tomorrow morning. Enjoy the rest of yo